Let's reconvene officially. Um, Welcome to the work session of July 9th. And we will begin with a discussion, follow up discussion, really, of the Pinehurst traffic circle issue. And there's a few moving parts and so forth. I just want to remind everybody that there are next week the North Carolina Department of Transportation are holding um, three sessions, one on the Monday at the Pinehurst Elementary School, one Wednesday at the Moore County Ag Center in Carthage, and one a week from this Tuesday at the First Baptist Church in Aberdeen to reveal, I think, in more detail, the shifted pillow proposal. And it's open. It's open to the public, so residents are encouraged to attend and make their thoughts known. Um, there were two other related issues on this topic that council has been discussing amongst themselves a little bit and hearing from the public. One had to do, and I'm going to turn to Jack Farrell in a moment. One has to do with the National Park Service and their involvement regarding the historic nature of the traffic circle and so on. So, Jack, I'll turn it over to you, and I know you've provided an initial draft for us to look at.
Thank you, Pat. The reason I went down this road a little bit, other than being very concerned with the historic nature of the community, was that after taking a close look and a further look at the extent of the project relating to the traffic circle, it became clear that it affects not just the circle, but also significantly Midland Road. And as Midland Road is mentioned prominently in our landmark application, I felt it was wise that we at least double checked with the National Park Service as to whether they would comment any further on their status. So it's wise to remember that there's probably four historic associations or groups or bodies that are involved to some extent with this project. Number one is, of course, the National Park Service, which is it chartered with administering and evaluating landmarks. The second, of course, is the North Carolina Cultural Resources Department, which in fact does studies as to historic preservation items and also will validate whether or not something should be on the National Historic Register. The third item is actually probably unknown, is that there is a group within NCDOT that is involved in making sure of historic preservation, not necessarily with the road and landmarks, but also with tunnels and bridges and other items that they may affect. And of course, we do have our local historic commission, which may in fact review the project since it is within the local historic district. So there's a number of different historic associations that could be involved to some extent in this project. Uh, but as far as communicating with the National Park Service, I put together a letter, and there's copies for everyone here, I think.
Jack's the same one you sent out an email.
No, this is my version 3.
Version 3. So the one that came out this afternoon.
Every time I look at it, I think, why did I say
evidently.
that? You know, so I tend to kind of fine tune it, if you will, based on a bunch of different factors. Is there one for you, Jeff? Did you get one?
Sorry.
The biggest difference between 1 and 2 and 3, there are some additional wordings in here, but is in the last second to last paragraph, asking them to review the design or historical impact. So it's up on the screen now, and it's just a matter of you may or may not want to send this, number one, and number two, you may or may not want to copy certain individuals, but I think it's a way for us to gain some visibility in both at the potentially national level and also at the state level with regards to the project and its impact on not only the landmark but also the community in general. So I'd look for some discussion in that regards.
Um, I, I think I'm not saying this one specifically, but I do think, given the concern many residents have expressed, I don't think we should leave any stone unturned. This seems like a topic that has passed the lips of some of our residents because of the status they're aware of, going back many years of the Circle and Midland Road. So from that standpoint, I think it's a good idea. I also think it's a good idea because it continues the relationship we have been trying to establish or reestablish and build with the National Park Service, which had an impact on decisions we made on the library and other decisions when we were deciding on sidewalks. We do that with, tipping the hat to them. And so this is, I think, sort of falls in that basket. Given that it is the National Park Service, I would think it's wise that we copy our Congressman Hudson, so that, because it's going to a federal agency, so he'll be aware that we are doing such a thing. And but I defer to others if there's anything in particular in this, wording wise, that someone feels we should alter or
I'm open.
pardon or soften.
I don't claim perfect.
No
the
pride of
perfect
authorship.
quote,
That's fine. But what I'd like to walk away with tonight is a general approval of sending a letter. Maybe we sleep on it for a day or two and look at it carefully, and then get any comments back to Jack and amongst ourselves. And then I think it's
I'll email version 3 to you guys later today.
and then I would sign it on behalf of the village council. But
That question for you.
Sure.
You were briefed, I think you and Mr. Sanborn had a meeting with Mr. Malamphy. What is it, about 3 months ago, 2 months ago, something like that?
I think it was March of 2024. Yeah.
About
Yeah.
3, 4 months ago,
Yeah.
something like that. Were you actually briefed on the plan that's going on right now? So of the
Well-
quote shifted pillow and things like that?
I didn't leave with a piece of paper, which I wish I had, but maybe. And when I left, I left with the name, the Shifted Pillow, which is a tough thing to forget, and I left with this newer concept they had of a road, but there wasn't the details that I've now come aware of from residents who've expressed a big concern about eminent domain. I wasn't really clear on this, the crossing of Midland Road.
Mhm.
I was very clear about the circle itself and transforming it into a rectangle. So I did get a briefing, but I didn't walk away with a piece of paper. And so all I really have is my memory, and knowing that they were going to give, this was the first, I guess I was getting a pre-brief briefing, so to speak, when they gave a public presentation at the Sand Hills Metropolitan Planning Organization,
Mhm.
which was more detailed, and it was open to the public. And that was probably a month or so later, maybe in April. It was held at the community center. So it was whenever we were in that midst of, we couldn't sit here.
May meeting.
Maybe it was May. Okay. That had more, obviously more attendees, and a little more detail came out about eminent domain. It registered with me there for the first time.
That came out from where?
From their presentation.
Okay.
Okay. And then it sort of took off from there, I guess.
I certainly read the letter that you had in the paper with Nancy Fiorello and John Strickland
Yes.
on there talking about it. Certainly keeping up with different concerns. I went and got briefed through NCDOT in October last year. My concern on here, when we're talking about this, is I don't want to be overstating. We're talking about a lot, but there's also when you start talking about it, you start saying, okay, this is what it is. My understanding walking away from that is that nothing is set in stone. My understanding is that there's going to be a planning phase that talk about it, and has to occur after there's these public meetings.
Yeah.
And so as we're doing this and we're talking about writing a letter, I would think it'd be prudent to wait until at least after next week where we have the presentations from NCDOT and have the information there to make sure that what we're stating here is actually in the same in line with that, and going through that. So I just throw that out as to make sure we're able to
I
strengthen
don't-
our position.
I don't think we have to rush this before the meetings. So I'm fine with waiting until after next week's meetings. I think that, I think that what I don't want to be in is a place where someone says the Park Service never heard from the council
I understand.
formally. And which is one of the reasons I like sending the letter, but I have no problem with waiting to after those meetings.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's coming out that's being stated that it's new to me. The eminent domain aspect is one of those, and you know, certainly concerning issues on there.
Yeah.
And the reason I ask you the question, is that coming from NCDOT, or is that coming from assumptions? And I don't know.
I can just tell you
Okay.
that I know it's coming from some residents who called me.
Absolutely.
That's
The
who called me
concern
about
is
their
definitely
home.
there.
So that's what I
Absolutely.
know about. But it's not. It's something they were told when they went to the NCDOT office in Aberdeen, I think. Some engineer told them that their property was, probably going to get.
With regard to this, the concerns about eminent domain, which are very real, I think it's fair to say that in all of our historical conversations with DOT about this project and others, they always talk about it, but they talk about it in different terms. They talk about right-of-way acquisition.
Yeah, it's different. Yeah,
And eminent domain is really, it's just the last option
it is.
might have to pursue in their efforts to do right-of-way acquisition. So the first thing they're going to do is try to negotiate with the property owners.
Right.
And if that doesn't bear any fruit, then the backstop is eminent domain.
Well, I do believe eminent domain is basically the nuclear option of where to take this project, which and the homeowners I met with, one of them has been in that home for 20 years. One moved here in 1996. They're well-kept homes. They're not subject to condemnation or so forth because of the way they're managing their property. So I agree with exactly what you said. They talked about right-of-way acquisition, but I never took that as eminent domain. And I don't know anyone else who might have.
It's a fact of highway work across the
I
United
understand
States.
right of acquisition. I didn't.
And I'm Jeff Morgan. I would add that the first time I saw any of this was at the SMPO Technical Committee meeting, prior to which they then made a presentation to the entire SMPO, and it had a map on it. And on that map, actually, if you looked at it, where they're turning Midland, where they proposed to turn Midland Road up and join 211, went right through a house that they had described on there. But beyond that, if they were to do that, as with all things with the government, they obtain a right-of-way, which I believe is 75 feet. And if you then look at the houses farther up Dalrymple, not the one on the corner of Dalrymple and Midland Road, 75 feet goes into the middle of their backyards, swimming pools or what have you. So it is more extensive than simply a house that might have to be acquired or some transaction negotiated. And I remember the May meeting, they put up on a big screen like this, they put a picture of the map, but the Dalrymple Road was this little tiny curve that wasn't really explained.
It was cut off a little.
And
It was.
so I think they have begun to be public with this. And part of what we'll talk about a little bit are some of the assumptions that appear to go under this when we finish with the letter. The other comment that I had with regard to the letter, and I agree, we probably ought to wait and see what all three presentations are next week.
No, 2 are next week and 1 is the following week.
But at least the one in Pinehurst. And let's see what comes out of that.
Absolutely.
Right?
And I would also like the letter to be put through village attorney to review it, of course.
Yeah, I seem to recall part of the conversation we had in connection with the library was the fact that the original Gibbon Library, built in 1964, although not technically a contributing property, was included on the application for National Historic Landmark status, and if I recall your conversation with them, the Park Service attributes some importance to that fact.
Well, they, regards to the library, they attributed the importance to the village green
Right,
and
yes.
anything which impact the village green. And now, the contributing structure is the entire Pinehurst road system. And if you'll read the second page where it describes excerpts from that document, which is the application for the landmark in 1994, it specifically calls out the traffic circle multiple times as being important. And more importantly, Midland Road, which we've discovered is going to be significantly impact. That's contributing structure. So at the list of contributing structures, which obviously almost all of them are buildings, cottages and so forth and so on, one of the major contributing structures, which is clearly identified here and is described in elsewhere, is the road system. And the road system is described as, if it says, continued, that characterizes, immediately becomes a primary ornamental gateway to Pinehurst today. That was description of the circle. And so there was a lot of discussion during the application, that is for the landmark, about whether the circle ought to be in it. And there's a significant number of letters back and forth between various people. And they made a compelling argument that the traffic circle, although not in the period of significance, was a significant item, and Midland Road itself was a significant part of the contributing structure, that is the Pinehurst Road system. I know that's a long way around to say it's important. Sorry about that.
Let me respond one more to Dr. Morgan. You raised the idea that this is a plan, or they're proposing something that we and others are going to have comments on to the NCDOT. And apropos to that, in one of the articles in the newspaper on this topic, the one of the engineers, it may have been the main engineer, said this. It was a quote regarding the proposal. "We wanted to make sure we get input because it's a big deal. It's a big change, and the circle is a historic, iconic kind of landmark for a lot of folks. We want to make sure we can get all of the input we can to make the right decision." So I think that reinforces that they're looking for input, and dovetails with what your comment was a little
And
bit.
it falls in line exactly what I said in
Yeah.
our last meeting, which is I highly encourage our citizenry to go to those meetings and make your voices heard and make sure that the concerns are being addressed. So I highly encourage that.
And they are, this may be seen as kind of a small gesture, but they are listening. They're hearing concerns about the rerouting of Midland Road and the property impacts associated with that. And they're hearing concerns about our objections to that loss of the kind of that gateway straight shot of Midland Road coming into Pinehurst. And as a result, they are studying the feasibility of, rather than hooking Midland Road up to the north and joining 211, running it straight out and joining in with 15501 just south of the primary intersection.
Sort of like it is now, where it bends?
No,
Similar.
Well,
They're
no,
fairly close to that same alignment, yes.
Okay, that'd be interesting to see. So I think from an action item standpoint, we're going to give some information back to Jack and amongst ourselves as far as comments or suggested edits here. We'll try to come up with a draft that can go through our village attorney and all, and then we'll wait and see if there's anything we need to amend or correct based on after hearing the hearings, with a target of being able to send this out maybe at next Thursday or Friday.
Yeah, I think I understand you would be the signer,
Sure.
so to speak, but I think you ought to determine who the CC list ought to be at the same time.
Well, I do think we're sending it to, well, I think we owe it to NCDOT to copy, I guess it's Ruben, whoever the appropriate folks are, and Jeff Sanborn, you probably know who we should hit there. And I do think we should do it to Richard Hudson also.
Well, and also the North Carolina Cultural Resources Department.
Oh,
too.
yes. Yeah, okay, we'll capture
It
all
would
that.
be chartered with potentially doing a 106 study,
Okay,
as they did in 1999 for the 211 widening.
I see. Okay. Boy, Jack, between the deer and 211's widening, yeah, that's okay. All right. So we've made a decision of what to do next in this. Do I hear that from everybody?
Well, we got to discuss the,
Oh, no, we're going to go to another topic, but I wanted to do the letter
on
part.
the letter part, yeah. if
But
you're- if
edits
you're
to
happy with it.
Jack, and then we'll see what happens next week. And,
Yeah. Okay. All right. Now we go on to, I guess, the second item, which is more sort of data-driven. I'll say that and turn it over to you, John Taylor.
I waved this very pretty presentation around which I had asked for originally origin and destination data. Where's the traffic coming from and where is it going to that goes through the traffic circle? And when I first got this back before the last meeting, and I'd actually taken it down to the folks in Aberdeen who said they had never seen this before, they didn't know who did it, but Doug Willardson connected me with Allison Klutz of the DOT, who also brought in Craig Scheffler, who's with their consulting firm. I spent half an hour or so with them, and I think I now understand this. And without going through all of the data, if you look on the front, first of all, what you have here, the first page is what they call the raw data current. It was actually taken in February of last year, February of 2023. The second page, the interesting thing is, if you look at this, they imply that there are 4,095 cars that go in and almost 4,200 that go out. I don't exactly know how that's possible. You would think that those numbers should have to be even. And in fact, the second page where they adjust the data, those numbers are even. And the adjustment is what I would describe, not entirely scientific, but it's designed to say, look, we understand in any given period of time, in and out, no one just drives around and around in the circle. So just looking in the lower left corner of the first page where I've circled a couple of numbers, that's Midland Road coming from the west of the traffic circle. The 780 is the number of cars heading toward the traffic circle during, in this case, the morning peak traffic period. The 23 that is circled, that's cars coming out of PGA Boulevard, turning right onto Midland Road, heading for the traffic circle. And the 15 that is above is traffic coming out of Dalrymple Road, turning left onto Midland Road. So the 780 plus the 23 plus the 15 actually gives you 818. I'll give them a pass for it not being exactly 819. So you have 819 cars coming into the traffic circle, and it's the same for all of these entries and exits. So they've taken current data on that, and they've given us that for 2023. The second, the second page is, let me just be sure that I'm reading this correctly. Yes, the first page is their raw data, the morning and the afternoon. The second page is their adjusted data from 2023. The third page is their projection for 2029. Yes, morning and the second and afternoon. And the last page is 2050 forecast. So I asked, how did you come up with those? And the answer is, and I sent Craig Scheffler's email along to all of you mid this afternoon, or late morning and mid this afternoon. They start with this Office of Management and Budget overall population forecast for Moore County. That's sort of the starting place, and if I understand it correctly, that was the trigger to say, there are going to be another 75,000 people here, there are going to be more cars by some count, and we can't sit and do nothing. In, I think, either 13 or 14, a presentation was made to council using data from that period of time. I think it was made by Natalie Hawkins. I wouldn't swear to that, but I do remember being at the meeting, looking at these same sort of things. That information has not yet been, that information was in part taken input from individual municipalities in 3 areas. Number one, what they estimated their population increase to be. Number two, what they estimated their employment increase to be. And number three, what they estimated what I will call business formation. And that I would define as land that is going to be allocated to either retail, commercial, or industrial. In the case of Pinehurst, that's probably at this point going to be either in Pinehurst South or in Village Place. There's just not a lot of other land available in the current village limits. But obviously in Aberdeen or in Southern Pines, where they have a lot more, or Carthage, they have a lot more land, and there could be much more development. They do intend to update those numbers, and they will probably do it through the SMPO. They have not begun that process yet, and as the last email that I forwarded said, they're only 50 to 60% along with updating the model that was in use then, and a good portion of finishing the update to that will be coming back to Pinehurst and other municipalities and saying, update our numbers. So that struck me as interesting because it means in part the numbers that they're using as justification for this project are round numbers 10 years old, and there may or may not be significant changes in what people would forecast. We simply don't know because they haven't even asked us for that yet. I would guess, Jeff Sanborn, that with the SMPO, I think, being organizationally formed now, that might be something that they could be coming to us, to the SMPO with fairly soon to say, start getting your numbers together. That's not going to be a one-week exercise. That's going to take some staff time, I would assume, for Pinehurst to come up with an idea.
Trying to recall, we have had some recent discussion at the SMPO meetings about the travel demand model and where they are in that progress, and whether or not SMPO is going to continue to work hand in hand with Moore County under the same framework with the same model. And I think the decision that the board made was that we would continue to work with a county-wide methodology going forward. I don't recall hearing what the timeline associated with that was going to be. Regarding some of your comments, in that 2013-2014 timeframe estimate that you referenced, we also had a responsibility to report on projections for our ETJ. That was also true for all of the other local governments.
I would assume so, sure. That they're going to contribute to traffic, so.
Right. With regard to this, the question about how DOT is currently estimating projections for traffic, my understanding is that they're looking at it through a couple of different lenses. There's the overall state demographer numbers, which don't give you a lot of granularity because they aren't figuring out where all those numbers are going to be inside the county, right? So that provides maybe one bound on whether it's the upper bound or lower bound, I don't know, but that's one bound on what those projections should be. And another bound is what was forecasted based on the 2013-2014 work that you're talking about. And what that second piece of the puzzle does is it gives us an idea of how that population gain is going to be distributed around the county. And so I think what they're really doing is they're extrapolating, or they're comparing those two data sets and figuring out what the best guess is in between.
And I think, Jeff, the terminal time for the 2013-14 was 2040. It wasn't 2050. So
Right.
somehow whether they just assumed a growth rate or what, I don't, who knows. But I think that's correct. We had,
Let me ask
I'm
you,
sorry.
why do I think that they said that the updated data would be to us by the end of this calendar year? Am I totally, is that, they never promised that?
No, it's not even feasible.
Oh, okay.
I would be surprised if that happened. I'm not
Okay.
sure that we will have our own revised estimates by then. Maybe we will. But
They may have suggested that they'll have another year's worth of actual data.
Okay, could be. All right. I accept that. Go ahead.
The second thing that I wanted to look at, and it's actually included in the 2029 and the 2050 projections, there's a little table up in the upper right-hand corner which is their actual origin and destination data. And the way you read this, instead of trying to read those numbers, which are very small, I would go to the second handout.
Are you on page 3 or 4 of the big handout when you say the upper right-hand corner?
I'm on page 3. The
Okay.
first time you see anything. They did not give those numbers for the 2023, but Craig Scheffler provided those to me in an email, which I think you all have now. So they didn't give us those numbers for the current, but they gave it to us for the projections in 29 and in 50. And I just re-summarized those into these other sheets. And what I tried to look at was the road pairs. So reading across the top, this is inbound traffic on 15501 is roadway 1, and then C211 is roadway 2, and so forth. And then the outbound traffic on the same roads, which is why the diagonal is empty. I mean, in theory, someone could have forgotten something at home and turned around and gone back the same way they came in, but in general, not too much. By the way, just one other comment on the big numbers. If you're coming down 211 during either the morning or the afternoon rush hour and you intend to go down 15501 and you don't want to wait in the left-hand lane, which is backed up to Page Road, and you come down and you take the hard right and go west on Midland Road and make the U-turn and then go, that actually does get counted twice. You get counted as entering the circle once on 211. Now, they have a count of how many people make the U-turn. I don't think that.
Well, there's different places to turn.
Right, no, well, they may not have all of them, but they at least, they do track those. And I believe at the May meeting at the community center, one of the representatives from either DOT or their consultants suggested that a greater than proportionate percentage of the volume is 211 coming into the traffic circle and 15501 south. It is not Midland Road both ways. It is not 15501 both ways. How the 15501 traffic might change in the future is another question. They actually assume different growth rates for the different legs, but none of them are that different. They're all kind of 1.3 to 1.5%. They're pretty close to one another. So I just paired them up here, and not surprisingly, on the top sheet currently, the two-way traffic on that traffic pair is 799 in the morning rush hour and 871, and
When
that
you
is
say
but
two-way, what are the two ways? That's where you
coming
lost
down to 11 and continuing south on 15501,
going down
or
to
coming
Aberdeen.
north on 15501 and going out to 11.
Gotcha. Okay.
And that, I had heard that before, and Jeff Morgan, I had also been down in the run-up to the last election talking to the people in Aberdeen about just this general idea. And I was wondering, because one of the things which they told me is when they analyze problems like this, they don't tend to give you an option. They try to figure out what they think is the best option, and that's the one that they give you. But I wondered whether among in addition to the 7 things which in the letter of January of 2023 have not been acted on yet, and by the way, again, all this data is from February of last year. They don't have the data for calendar 24 yet. They don't have data for crash data or traffic data with post the installation of the bollards. We presume that'll be coming the next couple of months, but we don't have it yet. So and I've done the same thing for the 2 projections in 2029 and 2050. I don't think we need to go any deeper into the numbers, but I'm happy to try to answer questions if I can. It just suggested to me that if you had a way, not a flyover, to take just those 2 legs and take that traffic out of the round and round portion, you might solve a meaningful amount of what is currently the projection. The other thing that I looked at was between now and 2029, remembering that they don't intend to stick a shovel in the ground until, I believe, August of 2030. The projected increase from now to 2029 is a little under 9%. So this is not a problem that is going to get demonstrably worse in that time frame. It's 42% if you look out to 2050, which is very much in line with their projected increase in volume. I think they say 55,000 vehicles a day today, and their projection is 80,000 in 2050, and that's round numbers 40%. So,
With regard to your suggestion, I agree with you. I think that if there was a way to remove that traffic out of the circle, it would work relatively well. And when you really think about it, that's what the flyover was. And so when they gave the presentation in June of 2022, while they preferred the CFI option because it certainly provided, based on their analysis anyway, provided a more thorough and longer lasting benefit. They seemed inclined to accept the flyover option if that was our preference as well. Is there another way to remove that leg of traffic without doing a flyover? That's a good question. I mean, a tunnel might be another option. It would be probably vastly more expensive, and you would have pretty significant stormwater removal challenges associated with something like that. But
I actually proposed to them a trench, not a tunnel, because I think it'd be less expensive. There are definitely stormwater issues with that, but
How does a trench work?
if you think about
tunnel that's not covered.
yeah, if you think
Okay.
about three major cities that I'm familiar with, Detroit, Los Angeles, and San Francisco, the expressways in the city all typically exist one level down from the street level traffic. But they're not all covered in tunnels. This is not the Big Dig in Boston, where it is actually covered. And the guys in Aberdeen didn't laugh that out. They said, well, yeah, you could consider that. Their question was, do you put retaining walls in or do you have sloped walls? And the retaining walls are certainly more expensive. But, and they cause, you need less width. If you went with sloped walls, you actually need 150 feet. If you go with retaining walls, it's closer to 50. If you think about the existing, what I will call the forested area, and the circle is at 500 plus feet, maybe it's 10 or 15%, as opposed to paving the whole thing over and losing all 6 acres. I don't know.
And
I'm not a highway
I
engineer.
understand. But
clearly,
a
so.
trench, obviously, it wouldn't matter whether it's a car or a truck.
It has to be tall enough to accommodate both.
Whereas a tunnel would have some implications as to, you're going to have to dig pretty deep on a tunnel if you're going
Now,
to get
even
trucks
with,
going
even
down
with a
there.
trench, you're faced with the same, I guess, challenges because you still have to get under the other
Yeah,
roadways.
there has to be a bridge over where it goes
Okay.
under. But
Okay,
if,
so that the rest of the circle runs around over.
one of the concerns about the flyover seemed to be that you still had to dig up trees and what was the aesthetics of it and so forth, so in any event.
I had a couple of quick questions so I have my facts right. I'm on your first page, and in the left-hand corner where you walked us through the numbers that you circled, 780, 15, 8, 19, right turn on Midland, left turn on Midland. You first said that the number 780 was the AM peak hour. Did I
Yes.
get that right?
Yes,
So the other numbers, are they AM peak also?
all are, yes. And that's actually defined, if you get out a magnifying glass, as 7:45 to 8:45 in the morning.
I'm not
They
going to,
appear in very small font underneath the red numbers.
okay.
Really got to look for it.
That is helpful to me. And you can extrapolate these charts the same way as you flip them over?
Yeah. They attempt to, I mean, obviously on 211, they went out as far as Page Road. So their traffic, inbound traffic at Page Road, how much is added or subtracted at that intersection. You've got Aviemore Drive on one side, how much is added or subtracted to the outbound side of that. And that gives you the inbound side to the circle itself.
Okay, thank you for educating me further. I have one question that I raise from time to time, and actually, Jeff Sanborn, you may actually know this answer. I thought you once mentioned it, and I just didn't sink in with me. When are they planning to address 15501 North's two-lane status to Moore? Because I believe that is a real problem coming towards our circle, and it will be.
Their current plan is to do it at the same time they're doing the traffic circle. And if you recall the briefing that they gave to SMPO, they're contemplating or trying to figure out whether or not they can actually combine those two projects.
Right, they were thinking about it. Okay, so it's
Either
in the
way,
same
it's not-
horizon.
in the same time frame. But
You mean the project that takes it all the way to 73?
that's right.
Ooh.
Any other questions for John, or John, do you have more to tell us?
I just wanted to inadvertently, in the last meeting, I misstated one number out of the table that they had presented. There was the crash data for 2023, which I thought was calendar year, and it was actually only through May 31st, so I wanted to correct the record on that. The other wrinkle that comes into these projections is we will presumably need, Pinehurst and other will have to update the so-called traffic area, or TAZs, traffic area zones, which were referenced by a public speaker at the last meeting. A lot of those, they look like even leaving out the ETJ, I mean, the projection of 1,000 around Lake Pinehurst. I don't know how that would have been possible in 2014. It is certainly not possible today. So those numbers will have to be updated as part of that process.
I think that we did some very extensive analysis on those numbers back in 2016, maybe 15. And based on that analysis, the projections for the TAZs that are within Pinehurst were certainly very realistic, based on the number of undeveloped lots that we could count at that time in those areas. In the TAZs that are kind of more out in the ETJ, there's a lot of room for disagreement.
I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, that will be part of updating these numbers that the SMPO will do, not just Pinehurst, but all of us.
Right.
Other questions or thoughts on this aspect? John, thank you for your really drilling down on this. It is very informative, and we obviously we're going to look forward to additional data, which will maybe bring things a little clearer into light as to, because there are concerns as to the public's perception of the accuracy of these projections. And you know, if you're going to propose something and you're going to have a projection, you want to have a confidence factor that what you're saying is not only believable but somewhat provable. They are projections, so I understand that. Which leads me to one item, and I see the chief here. Well, they both looked up. I see the only guy who's still the chief, and the question is on the traffic circle with the lane dividers up, the distinction between accidents that occurred in the past versus the accidents that have occurred in the last 6 months. Now, I know you guys can report those on an overnight basis to a degree in your PDD report. Is the information you have in that report, Len, does that get sent to NCDOT, or are they keeping their own records, or how does that work? Is there anything you can shed any light on this? So they're pulling it from that.
Every time one of our law enforcement agencies deals with an actually validated crash, they submit a report
Okay.
that goes to that database.
So they should have something more timely than the end of the year for 6 months on traffic crashes or accidents. I don't want to say crash, accidents. Okay, well, I think it's something we need to ask them, because it just, people are sort of curious. You know, there's an assumption, wow, those lane dividers are working, and maybe they are, but I don't have a way of saying, well, here's the data, so. You have thoughts?
I would say that I really thought at some point we'd see the last 3 or 4 get knocked over by somebody who just tried to cut in hard at the very end. I don't believe we've seen that yet. I hope we don't going forward. So we're talking about some ways to extract that data.
Okay.
It shouldn't be end of the year, I wouldn't think.
Okay, that's right.
I think it's reasonable to expect that it's having some positive impact. The degree to that, to which
Right, that the degree to that is in the data.
Yeah, we do know that, based on the accident history information that we've got from DOT, and they've included in their presentations, the overwhelming majority of the accidents at the circle are rear-end collisions.
Yes.
Which are not typically what we're we're talking about
No.
in this
And
case.
many of them not even in the circle itself, in the lead into
The
the
lead-in.
circle.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Queue up, yeah, okay. Other questions or comments for John or for Jeff or anybody else? Okay. I know some of us are probably going to be attending those meetings. And by the way, there is a pre-meeting for elected officials, if I'm saying it correctly, on Monday at Pinehurst Elementary School. I think it's at 3. Am I correct?
Tuesday,
Same day.
Tuesday,
Same day, 3 o'clock.
3 to 5. Yeah.
Tuesday, 3 to 5. Okay. All righty. Hold on a second if I'm missing anything before we go on to other business. I do have I have 2 other business items that I want to bring up. One I should have brought up earlier. We have an agreement with Dornoch, Scotland, in the United Kingdom that was established, I think, a year ago for an annual exchange of letters between our communities. So we're at that point where we're going to send them our letter and they're going to send us their letter. I've worked with staff and particularly Shannon. We've got a pretty good letter here. Shannon, has it been shared with the council? Could you just send them all a copy and so they can see what we're sending?
You need someone to hand carry the letter?
Going to volunteer.
That's an original and a good question, Jack. You'll have to get in line because I think Strickland's already on the runway.
BYOT, buy your own ticket.
So
Problem.
if anybody catches something in this letter, please let us know and we can adjust it. Otherwise, I will sign it and we can transmit it in the quickest way available so that we meet our commitment. And the second item under other business is I mentioned about a little update on the fiber optic installation that is going on out there. And I know, I don't know if I think we all received this update on it from Mike Apke. Should be at our seats here. And what he mentioned to me is that really Ripple is the one who is actually moving out on this. One other company, who I can't recall their name, talked about it but hasn't produced any proposal for action. And Spectrum sort of talks about stuff, but they've already got a lot of wire in the ground. So,
They're just doing some minor extension.
right. So it seems to be going along well, uninterrupted, and neighbors aren't complaining. And
I mean, yeah, it's going along well in terms of the end result and a lack of complaints about the result and the process. I think they may be a little bit behind schedule on what their initial
what
thoughts
they were
were.
gonna do.
But as I recall, they are either underway now or soon will be underway in what we call Old Town West, that portion of which is east of Highway 5.
Have they actually turned the service on for those people in Donald Ross or what have? Because I thought they started in Southern Pines and.
I don't know. I mean, that's my neighborhood, but we didn't connect, so I can't validate. And then they're also about to start work in what we call North Lake Pinehurst, that area to the south of Linden Road.
Okay.
So there's a couple other people that are going to be install fiber optic cable also, and that's Spectrum, according to this memo. Spectrum and Conterra, I've never heard of those.
Yeah, Conterra hasn't moved
So we
forward.
have at least 3 different firms laying fiber optic cable in the area, is that correct?
But Conterra has not really put a shovel in the ground.
Currently are very minor players.
Okay.
But in the case of Spectrum, they have no plans beyond rolling it out to the resort? Is that what I
You
read?
must mean Ripple. Spectrum's already here.
Oh, this reads that.
No. Encroachment agreement to Spectrum for the installation of new fiber on Barrett and Ritter.
Okay. That takes care of that issue. Other business issues anyone like to bring up before we go on, move forward?
Did you want me to mention?
I
So
do.
there was a letter to the editor in the pilot recently relative to multifamily, and people may have been confused. That's clearly an internal Pine Wild issue that's going on related to Phase 4, which is a very large area next to Pine Wild, which the new owner plans to develop and has requested consideration as to whether or not they can put in multifamily in Pine and also be part of Pine Wild. It so happens that the CCNRs, the declarations which govern the Pine Wild Property Owners Association, does not allow for multifamily, so they will have to change their declarations. So that's what that issue is about. It will require a meeting of the Pine Wild residents or property owners to, in fact, change their PPOA covenants and declarations. So that's what that issue is about.
And what is the threshold requirement to change? declarations?
2/3.
2/3. Okay. And one resident indicated to me that the property that is actually in Pinehurst right now, they really can't change it to.
No, that is not correct.
That's not correct.
The 400 acres or so, which is on the left side of 211 as you're going towards West End, just past the Pine Wild entry gate, is not in the Village of Pinehurst
Right.
municipality. It's within Moore County zoning, so they will control that.
And none of those acres are on our side of the fence, so to
That
speak.
is correct.
Okay, thank you. Good to know. It's come up. I'm sure some Pine Wild residents will be engaged.
My house has the fence.
There's a fence. Well, it keeps the deer out anyway. All right. Having gone through that, those topics, does anyone have anything else before we move to the next item? Okay, the next item is closed session, so I will entertain a motion.
I move to recess the work session and enter into closed session pursuant to NCGS 143-318.11 Alpha 3 to consult with an attorney employed or retained by the public body in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege between the attorney and the public body, which privilege is hereby acknowledged.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. We will be moving to a closed session in a few moments once we clear the room appropriately.